We'll have a world-class manufacturing campus. I mean, that sounds kind of funny saying that. World-class is overused, but how else are you going to describe a modern factory with all the latest technology, the opportunity to be able to lay out your equipment in a more cellular fashion to create a better workflow? We've been in old factories since our founding.
Hey, I'm Ari Santiago, President and CEO of IT Direct. Welcome to this episode of Made in America. I'm with Scott Livingston, the CEO of Horst Engineering. Scott and I kind of connected through a CBIA article we were both published in. He's a third-generation family business manufacturer right here in East Hartford, Connecticut. Really excited to have him on and hear his views and talk about his history and experience. So, Scott, thanks so much for coming on today.
You're welcome.
So, listen, it's a Made in America podcast. So, same two questions we always start with. What do you guys make and why do you make it?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna throw you a curveball. I mean, I'll tell you what we do.
Sure.
We help people fly safely.
Okay.
Right, and the way we do that is we manufacture aerospace components. We've made aerospace components since our beginning in 1946, but now we pretty much exclusively make aerospace components. What was the second part of that question?
Why do you guys make aerospace components?
I mean,
like what? So you said now you only exclusively make it, so that would indicate that at some point that wasn't the only thing you
That's
made.
true. Yeah, because I mean, being here in Hartford, we did a variety of precision machine components, you know, from our founding through the first few decades. The big industries in Hartford in those days were typewriters, Underwood and Royal were based here, and firearms. But also just general manufacturing, machine tools, companies like Emhart. Aircraft was here the whole time as well, and we always dabbled in it. But as the economy changed, you know, 70s, 80s, and you had to be in higher and higher precision segments of the machining market in order to remain relevant, because all of the high volume, lower quality stuff left. You know, first other regions of the country and then offshore. And what we did is continue to focus on that high precision, and it became more and more focused on aerospace. You know, we do it because it's a good business to be in. It's a Connecticut River Valley business. And because we're just passionate about the mission, you know, helping people fly safely.
I think I want to pull a little bit on the thread about you talking about the change in manufacturing, because I've read an article that I think you wrote, it might be back in like 2013 even, around Labor Day, and talking about kind of manufacturing being back, which is a huge theme of Made in America. And one of the things that you talked about even back then was that transition from mass production to kind of the more high value. And I'm just really interested to hear, number one, kind of your thoughts and experience on seeing that firsthand from a family business that started in 46, went through that in the 70s and early 80s and 90s, and how you see that going into the future.
Yeah, I mean, that article was written 6 years ago. It was Labor Day. I felt like writing something and talked about how we were just coming out of the recession. Our low point was in 2010. So, you know, the economy hit the skids in 2008, but it took a couple of years for the pipeline to empty. Aerospace is typically the last one into recession, the last one out. So it had been a while for us. By 13, we were recovering, things were improving, and here we are 6 years later, and it's been a heck of a run. So I see things continuing to progress. I just did a important meeting with our team yesterday looking ahead to next year. The forecast from our director of finance is just for a modest amount of growth. We've got some internal challenges in terms of the fact that we'll be physically moving the business to a new factory, and that could
long-term good, but always disruptive.
Hey, it's going to there'll be some drag, no question about it. But the question is always, do you do this when you got nothing to do, or do you do it when you're buried with work, right? Is there ever a good time? No. But I would have to say that the fact that we have strong business, we've got the support of key customers, and the market is strong, then now's the time. You know, we were talking about this, and I'm constantly paying attention to the macroeconomic picture. what's going on in the industry. I mean, this morning we had a blowout jobs number. Unemployment's down to 3.5%, right? I glanced at the market just before I came in the room, and it was up over 300 points. I mean, on a Friday, it's like, when is this going to stop?
Right.
We've had a heck of a run. There could be any number of things that derail aerospace manufacturing,
right,
from Boeing's issues to the Chinese economy. It could be any number of things. It's historically been a cyclical market.
Sure. Tariffs. I mean, there's any kinds of problems yet.
Right now, we're just sticking with it.
Listen, trying to predict the future is never a good place to live. So let me ask you a question. You I think really rightly talked about the need for manufacturers to make the change, the ones that survived, that made the change from the mass production to the more high value. Do you see a current kind of trend in that direction? Some people talk about Industry 4.0 and technology investment. Where do you see the future to continue to be relevant to be a U.S. manufacturer? And a Connecticut U.S. manufacturer beyond that?
It's adaptability. We've changed many times over the years. As I mentioned, the typewriter components, we keep a typewriter upstairs in our mezzanine and outside the conference room, just as a physical reminder that, if we were still trying to make typewriter parts today, things would be quite different for our people. So automation is always been an important part of CNC technology. We don't have any robots feeding our machines yet, but our machines have been increasingly more automated over the past 2 to 3 decades, since CNC really became the way to go. Many of our old cam style screw machines have been retired. We are only running a couple. All of our equipment is servo driven. I think the next frontier is using more automation to feed the equipment. We're not there yet, given the high mix of parts that we have, relatively low value, super precision, but a real mix. So we haven't really spent the time to bring in the automation to actually feed the equipment. We're still pretty dependent on labor for that. But it's the digital transition in all the other aspects of the business that has been just as important, because we're a full service manufacturer. I mean, half our people don't work in manufacturing. I mean, they're in engineering and supply chain, quality assurance, right? Finance, all these support functions, and technology is just as important there as it is in manufacturing.
How have you guys leveraged that supportive technology?
We went through a major ERP implementation. Past 4 years, we spent several years looking for the right platform to take us into this next generation. We had been on the same system for 18 years. So that was huge. I mean, it was a massive investment. ERP is never easy, but we picked something that we could grow with. So that was a huge part of it. And I would say that there's a lot of other additional systems. Most of those are now cloud-based, from payroll to employee workflow to CAD/CAM. I mean, we have a ton of systems in our business. I mean, it's crazy when you look at the list of licenses.
Right. Take a step back and think about what you have now versus what you had 20 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, where's the choice? Where's the option?
Right.
Right.
No, listen, it's something I've been really passionate about for a long time, which is, I think, I love kind of the conversation about the transition manufacturers had to make between the 70s and the 2000s, right? If they wanted to remain relevant. And the ones that didn't invest in CNC technology and manufacturing automation, or, not automation, but to some degree automation, they didn't survive. And I've been sort of advocating for a long time that if we don't start embracing the digital revolution and evolution in manufacturing, the companies that embrace that will be the one 20 years from now, on this Made in America podcast talking about that transition. And the ones that don't will be the ones that get left behind, just like the companies did in the 80s and 90s.
Right. I mean, the only thing I'll add is that you have to be consistently investing, right? So it's got to be a continuous progress. When you look at auction flyers, you can tell when it went bad for that business, because they bought all their equipment in bursts.
Right.
And then they had gaps. So I don't know how I learned it. I think just observing the prior generation in our business, my father, my mother, my uncle, they consistently invested. So if we feel like we've gone a period of time that we haven't done something, it's time.
It's time to do something.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's actually talk about that a little bit. I mean, I think it's very interesting. You and I talked a little bit about how, your grandfather who started the business really worked very hard to provide, and each subsequent generation has been able to kind of advance the business, for lack of a better term. Or at least that's kind of my takeaway on our conversation.
Sure.
And I'm just interested if you maybe talk a little bit about that. How does that happen? Because, as I'm sure I'm not the first to tell you, the ability for businesses to survive generational transitions is not very high. And I don't know the exact numbers, but there's something like 70% of businesses don't even make the first transition, let alone going to the third generation and growing.
Yeah, I'm a little distant from some of the stats, but typically they say a third make it, and then a tenth of that, so 3% might make it to the third generation. Exactly. And I've been involved with family business as a sort of enterprise in itself. Right. Family business consulting, family business education. I've been involved all my life, and so I've looked at it closely, and I've looked at our own example. Every family is different. Mm-hmm. Every business is different. When you combine the two and you have a business owning family, you've got to do the things that work for your business and your family to get to that next generation. I would say there is a pattern of success. We observed a lot of other businesses. We brought in outside help to assist.
Assist in which aspect?
Assist in transitioning from one generation to the next. Mm-hmm. Now, that didn't happen G1 to G2, but G2 to G3, it was a much bigger deal. The stakes were higher, the business had grown, and we reached out for outside help.
When you say outside help, we're talking about like
consultants.
Okay,
yeah, advisors.
Not like a lawyer, but like a family transitional consultant.
Family business specialists. Okay. Right. And that was in the 99 to 2001 timeframe. And it was a tandem of practitioners. That's the typical model, is someone that has the business side experience and someone that has the sort of people side, the family side. And typically they are psychologists. They're trained in that aspect.
More emotional than logical.
Right. Organizational behavior, emotional intelligence, right? That relationship management, right? That's as important in a family business as having the technology or the business acumen. So you got to combine those two. Right. So, we got some help in that, and we've watched a lot of other businesses go through these types of transitions, and we invested in it. So,
make sure it be successful.
Yeah. When you added it all up, it was like buying a new machine, right? But instead we invested in outside support in order for us to learn the techniques that would allow us to have a healthy transition.
When you're thinking about the investments you guys make, whether it was kind of in this like family business specialist, or it's in technology, whether it's on the manufacturing floor or IT or personnel or training, or we talked about new facility building, like how does Horst go about making those decisions about investments? When you go, hey, it's been a while, we haven't done something, how do you decide where to invest?
We keep lists. And,
basic.
There's some are mental and some are documented. We've been reinvesting in our business since the founding. That's why we're still here. Right. It sounds like a cliche, but we put more in the business than we take out. Mm-hmm. Right. And it's just always been the case. It's the culture of our business. Our employees know that. The team knows that. It's very collaborative. So we now have a non-family management team, or a leadership team that runs the business. Yesterday was an interesting day. We had a joint meeting with my family, right? There's 3 other family members involved in the business, and our leadership team, and there's 3 of them. So I'm the only member of both teams. Okay. Right. So the family management team and the senior leadership team.
Is the family management team involved in day-to-day activities?
They are involved in day-to-day activities and high-level governance, and nothing in between. Okay. So it's a really interesting model.
That is interesting.
Yeah. So my father reports to Christina. My uncle reports to Ron through Greg. Okay. And my mother reports to Michelle.
And I don't know if I remember the names, but Michelle, Ron, and Christina are not family members.
They're not.
And they report to you.
Correct.
And then you report back to the family from a governance perspective as like the board.
We work together. Yeah, exactly.
That is an interesting management sandwich kind of there.
It is. And so my dad loves to work in sales at the tactical level. I mean, chasing quotes, working with customers day to day.
Relationships.
Yep. And now also developing our team, helping with that. But it's an ad hoc sort of thing. My uncle works on the engineering team. He's one of our checkers. right? And obviously a wealth of knowledge. He's dialed back a bit more, but still there for support. My mother works 2 days a week. She specializes in accounts receivable.
Okay.
That's kind of all she's focused on right now. She's part of the finance and accounting team.
That's great.
Right. And then periodically we'll meet to talk about the bigger picture.
And as that model's been working for you guys, it sounds like.
It's been working great.
How long have you been running it?
Oh, I mean, I started in 95 and we've had this model in various iterations since 2001.
Oh, so this is not new. I mean, this is a long, 17, 18 years.
Yeah. And the current leadership team, has been reconstituted over the past few years. Their 10 years go back as far as 3 years. So it's a relatively new leadership team.
Well, that means that this model stand the test of time. It stood some transitions. It's, that's pretty impressive.
That's right. That's
great. Yeah. So let me ask you, so as you're kind of thinking about how to stay relevant, and I love the way you're talking about the investments. They're sort of somewhat organic. There are some lists that are in your head, some lists that are grown. I think when you're talking about business and businesses surviving for a long period of time, one of the things I found sort of interesting about what you said is I think businesses need to reinvest to stay relevant and remain long-term, whether they're family businesses or not family businesses. The businesses that don't reinvest and look to the future, that stay married to the past, are littered of the stories, the Blockbusters, the Kodaks, the whatever, right? We could talk about that. But what does Horst do? Do you guys have any systems to sort of keep looking to the future while still taking your eye on today? Do you guys spend time thinking about either is aerospace going to continue to be good, or are there new parts or new areas of aerospace we need to get into? How do you guys manage the today and the tomorrow?
We have a formal management operating system. So we've embraced the Rockefeller habits. You're probably familiar with the book Scaling Up by Vern Harnish. That's the system that we've stuck with over the past 3 to 5 years. I would say that my exposure to the Rockefeller habits goes back more than 10 years. We started using it more formally about 5 years ago, but really the past 3 years with this iteration of our leadership team, we've really been more devoted to it. So we use the one-page strategic plan. We have a BHAG, which comes from good to great.
Yep.
The Rockefeller habits really isn't a unique system. It's in just a combination of a bunch of other management concepts.
Yep.
So we use that
strung together to make a best of breed kind of approach. I think is how they would argue it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yep.
So we use that as our model and our construct. The idea is not to be is not to stick with it entirely, but to just use it where it makes sense. We're constantly looking ahead when it comes to these investments. We also are very, very collaborative, so that the team can have ideas, and we want to encourage everyone to participate. Oftentimes I'm accused of just getting too many people involved and making a decision. It's kind of my style.
Yeah.
Occasionally you just got to kind of cut through it.
Yeah.
So when you think about our industry mix, right, we're pretty much exclusively aerospace right now. We've evolved, as I described earlier, maybe a couple percent is naval, defense, power generation, medical devices, motorsports, and our niche cycling products. But we're 98, 99% aerospace.
Right.
Within aerospace, we're probably 60% commercial, 40% military.
Okay.
And that fluctuates a little bit depending on the cycle. I think that military has come back quite strong under this administration. There's been a lot of defense spending, but the aerospace market is global.
Yeah.
So the commercial market's also seen a lot of positive growth in the past 7 to 10 years. We think about our exposure and whether or not we should be diversifying that mix, because precision machine parts are used in other industries like medical devices. And we've experimented, we've tried to diversify that mix a few times over the past 15 years. And for various reasons, we've remained focused on aerospace. We made an acquisition in the aerospace industry, and we'll likely make more. So that's where we're focused within the industry.
I'm just curious on that. Why? There's always the thing, right? I think there's a lot of business decisions, right? Do we focus and get more niche so we're better able to compete on that market, or we to some degree diversify to sort of mitigate risk? You've obviously tried both ways. You made a decision to go one way. Just want to think if you want to share about why you made that decision, or what you have obviously tried it didn't work. What would you do differently?
I'll give you an example. So we tried to diversify into the medical device market. We have processes that are used throughout that industry. Swiss Screw Machine is one example. It's perfect platform, manufacturing platform for medical devices, including orthopedic implants and surgical instruments. It'd be perfect, right? I mean, imagine having a business equal in size to our aerospace business exclusively in medical devices.
Sounds great.
Right, but it's a different culture. Right? It's a different industry. It's a different knowledge base. And what you know by heart works in aerospace because we've been in it for decades. And it's not as easily transferable to an entirely new market. We used a small acquisition to get our foot in the door. The recession hit in 2008. Big OEM customers in that industry went offshore for the first time, and business vaporized, right? So we didn't spend too much trying to break into it. Maybe we didn't spend enough. I don't know.
Did you get the critical mass? Sure.
We pulled back, just like we did with other experiments, and we're back in aerospace.
But I think what's a really, great takeaway on that point, right, is you're not afraid to try something and not afraid to say, hey, that didn't work for us. We're not going to continue to do it. That doesn't mean you're not going to try stuff. I know you guys also at one point had a facility in Mexico. And that facility is no longer around. You reshored that work back to Connecticut. Tried that. I mean, that's obviously a lot of people have thought about kind of offshore, reshore. I mean, I don't know if you want to share kind of any thoughts.
I'm laughing. You had to bring it up. I was at a meeting a couple weeks ago, and we were with my networking group. We were doing a little exercise about, if you could have back one decision, right? And it's tempting to say that the decision
was that an icebreaker for one of the meetings?
It was.
Yeah, it's a good icebreaker.
A communication starter.
Yeah, communication starter. Yeah.
So I mean, easy to look back on that decision to expand in Mexico as one, but I also look back and say, but how would life be different if I hadn't gone down that path? Certainly, we burned a lot of capital with our attempt to expand there. The goals, there was multiple goals. There was a whole set of goals, and I can't even rattle them all off right now. But there was a graphic that described it, that we embraced, and it wasn't just about more profit. Okay, we weren't there, meaning in Mexico, to dramatically lower the cost of production. We were there to grow our business. And it was an entirely new geographic location. Aerospace is dependent on these ecosystems. The broad ecosystem is global, but then there's pockets in different regions. And the Connecticut River Valley, in my opinion, is the best. It's got, we're called the Aerospace Alley. We just had that trade show a few weeks ago. You were there. So you get it, all right? And maybe some of the listeners of the podcast get it as well. But there are other pockets, and the U.S. Southwest and the Mexican Northwest is one of those emerging pockets.
Like that Arizona, like kind of down there?
Correct. And we were in Sonora, so we were south of Arizona, and which has become a lower cost manufacturing region. It's Mexico's dominant aerospace region, and it's adjacent to California and Arizona, where there's always been a lot of U.S.-based aerospace activity. So we figured that we could grow by being there. It was a long ways away. And being a small business, it was challenging and difficult to manage. We made it work, but we were at a crossroads. This is back in 2015 when we did eventually pull out. And we had to double down, right? So, we got up to about 50 people there. And it was going to require more and more and more investment. We had made an acquisition in Massachusetts in 2013, and there was just only so many resources to go around. I'm not even talking about money. I'm talking about the time, the energy, the leadership know-how, and it was at a crossroads. And we made the decision to pull back and to completely reinvest in U.S. manufacturing, in New England manufacturing, right? So Connecticut, we have an operation. In Massachusetts, we have an operation. And right now, that's where our focus is.
How do you feel about that decision with 4 years of hindsight on it? You happy with the decision to focus where you did?
I am. And now, of course, some people know that we're now taking on a huge project. We're going to renovate a major factory in East Hartford and take our Connecticut operations, which are in 3 buildings, and consolidate them. So it's a physical consolidation, but it's an expansion because it's going to more than double our footprint. We'll have growth to grow. We'll have a world-class manufacturing campus. I mean, that sounds kind of funny saying that. World-class is overused, but how else are you going to describe a modern factory with all the latest technology, the opportunity to be able to lay out your equipment in a more cellular fashion to create a better workflow? We've been in old factories since our founding, right? So you go back to 1946, and then when we moved to East Hartford in 1950, it's always been old infrastructure, and we've grown kind of piecemeal. That's very typical, and that's a smart and wise way to grow. And we don't have the ability to go just build a greenfield, warehouse or factory in the middle of the Windsor tobacco fields, right? Like Amazon or some of those firms. But this is the next best thing. We're putting in a lot of investment, and we think that that's the next frontier for us. So
a real big step forward, Scott.
It is.
I mean, it took the consolidation, the investment, the expansion. It's a good move.
So looking back, and you say, well, we probably could have done this sooner if we hadn't spent 8 or 9 years trying to make something go in Mexico, right? So that's where the little regret comes in, right? Is that capital was diverted, energy was diverted, and in hindsight, we had a lot of pressure to try something there, customer pressure, internal pressure to try something different. And the economy was very different in 2004, 2005, right? That's going back when manufacturing was really not being looked at as the future.
No.
And there were no podcasts called Made in America.
Yeah, no, there were not.
All right. And now we've had this resurgence. I'm always cautious to talk in bullish terms, but I mean, come on, we got to call it what it is. I mean, we've had some pretty remarkable growth.
Absolutely.
And that can only benefit our economy because of the multiplier effect. Our employees are doing well, and we're always trying to do more for them. There's limits to everything, but this has been a good year, and it's been a good string of years.
So let's talk about, you brought up employees, and I think employee growth and culture is super important. You mentioned earlier how low unemployment rate is. That makes finding and retaining good employees a challenge. And in an up market, there's a lot of competition for the people that work for you and the people that you're looking to hire, not just from other small and mid-sized manufacturers, but from some large ones that are here in the area that are maybe customers of yours as well. I mean, what is it like to work at Horst? How do you guys compete for that talent and win? Talk a little bit about that aspect.
We put our culture up against any other business. We're family owned, so we're thinking long term. We've already talked at length about reinvestment.
Do you think that reinvestment is a recruiting advantage?
Absolutely. We've reinvested in our people the same way we've reinvested in equipment. Now, that doesn't mean we haven't suffered the same turnover challenges that all other businesses in our industry have faced for decades, right? For our entire history, but we've done more intentionally to focus on our people in the past few years than ever before. And that's
how's that manifesting? What are like some of the things that you're doing? What's,
we coming out of a quarterly offsite, we launched a ad hoc team called the Cool Kids. The name, I can't take credit for it. My director of finance did a fantastic job, and she launched this. It's morphed into our employee experience team. We're getting the employees more involved in the direction of certain policies. Recently, we enhanced our PTO. Everybody's had to step up. I mean, compensation isn't everything, but in this tight market, we've had to step up, sharing the rewards even more so than we already did, and we've always done that. So we have a bonus program. Like I said, the PTO was actually employee driven.
What was the change that you made for PTO?
Well, it's an interesting one, and I'm giving away all my trade secrets here.
Well, you and I both know, Scott, it's not the knowledge, it's the execution that makes the difference.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, it sounds simple, but for many years, if you worked overtime and you took a PTO day, you'd lose your overtime. You'd lose the overtime because you didn't get to the full 40 of worked hours for the week. It was a simple adjustment. We've enhanced it to allow people to be able to take a day off and not lose their overtime. Makes a little bit of a difference for folks that we need the help. We can't hire enough people to fill all the positions, so we have to work quite a bit of overtime to keep pace with customer demand. It's an easy give, right? But it came, the whole beauty of it is it came from the employees. We let the employees debate it and within a committee format, describe what would be best for them, and that's where they landed, made the recommendation, and leadership team endorsed it. So that's just one example.
Which, by the way, I think, to be honest with you, I think the more exciting and if you want to talk about the secrets you're giving up, I actually think it's less about that PTO policy change that you made and more about how you made it.
Well, that is the secret.
Oh, that was the secret.
I just gave it up. I mean, but it's the culture, right? That's got to be cultivated, and we don't always get it right, but we're working at it every day. I think that the way the new factory is going to be laid out and designed is involving a lot of input from different people in the business. Just this morning, I was in a huddle with the sales team. I just kind of dropped in, and the director of sales and customer service was sharing the architect's rendering of what the facade of the building will look like. I mean, that's pretty cool.
That is pretty cool.
Being in business for 73 years, and we've had expansions and additions, but we've never built a new factory. Interestingly, my most significant experience with that was when we expanded in Mexico, where it was all new and shiny.
Right.
But that didn't really benefit the people that have been with us for a long time. So now this is a great opportunity.
That is a great opportunity. Well, so what are, just want to push a little bit more on some additional stuff. Like, how are you engaging everybody across the organization to make sure, well, actually, maybe we should tell the audience how big Horst Engineering is from a staffing perspective, so we get some context.
We have about 150 people, with 30 of those based at our Massachusetts operation, 120 or so based in our Connecticut operation.
So in East Hartford with 120 people and 3 or 4 buildings, I can't remember the exact count, how do you guys go about uniting the team because to make them feel like they are one team and make sure that, the setup people and, shipping and receiving people and whatever are feeling as engaged and empowered as the non-family leadership team that you guys have brought on board?
The physical plant structure as it currently exists has been a barrier for a long time. We have 2 plants on Cedar Street in East Hartford and 1 4 miles away on Burnham Street. It's technically on the South Windsor side of the street, but it's on the town line. So that group's been over there for 4 years since we pulled back from Mexico and had to shift all the equipment around. We knew that it wasn't the long-term outcome, that we weren't going to remain there. It's a leased operation or a leased building. So it's been difficult to really get people to interact at the level that we want them to and need them to. That being said, we do a lot of communicating, a lot of communicating. So the Rockefeller Habits, we've got daily huddles. So everybody's in a little huddle every morning. We use weekly meetings within the leadership team and the management teams to get more communication. We have quarterly all hands meetings, and we'll bring everyone at each state location. So Connecticut will all meet together, Massachusetts all meet together, and then a lot of folks from Connecticut will head to Massachusetts so we can share the same message, deliver the same theme. This year, for the first time in a long time, we're actually going to have our holiday parties offsite. Okay. Right? We just can't fit in the shipping department anymore. So in the new location, we'll have ample space, right, to be able to do this back in-house. But as a transition year, we're going to do it at a local banquet hall. So we'll have an opportunity to get everyone together there, kind of do a little bit of a State of the Union, talk more about looking ahead. That's always what's more important.
You guys embrace open book mentality at all? Like what do you guys have with that?
I wouldn't describe it as open book, but I would say that it's open and honest and transparency. So we share sales to the dollar with everybody. We track it. It's on our video boards. It's not our only KPI that we share. Our incentive plans, have KPIs that relate to sales, earnings, which we share. We share a profit index, on-time delivery, and then a couple quality metrics, including customer escapes and internal defects. So that's pretty much, those 5 KPIs are pretty much how we operate the business at a global level, letting everybody know. And of course, each area has got to have their focus, but that's what we talk about as an entire group.
So, running a business and, a successful business such as Horst and, seeing it grow and managing multiple facilities and all these people, it sort of requires, I think, a good framework. And we've talked a little bit about the Rockefeller habits. And like, where have you gone to educate yourself about like how to be a better business owner and run a better business?
I started by coming to Horst. Right? When you grow up in a family business, where your grandfather worked in it, your father, your mother, your uncle, you end up really learning kind of the old school way. And that, first and foremost, has been the most important factor for me personally.
Sure.
I would say then that going to university, I didn't study engineering. I didn't study anything specific to manufacturing, but I did eventually study economics, and that gave me a foundation related to business. I subsequently went back and studied business and worked throughout those years in the business. Now it's just constant learning. For me, I benefit from a couple of different networks, peer networks, one of them in particular, YPO. I think you and I share a common passion for networking, so to speak, with a lowercase n, but YPO has all these networks with an uppercase N. Mm-hmm. And I have a small peer group that I meet with monthly. Some people would describe it as an external board of advisors, but that's really oversimplifying it because it doesn't just involve business. It's whole life, right? Yep. So I put a lot of effort into being the best person I can be, the best leader. And that extends, starts with my family. It continues with, the way I personally care for myself, so to speak. And that involves learning. So I learn a lot through YPO, the network itself, and just constantly reading and listening. I mean,
peer learning's been really important, you think, in helping to shape the business person that you are and the person that you are in general?
Yes. And, my first taste of it came with that program that I did at Harvard Business School. So I didn't get an MBA, but there's a program at HBS called OPM. Mm-hmm. Owner President Management Program. And it's designed for people who maybe are already working and can't break away, can't do the nights and weekends things, which I investigated. I looked at UConn, I looked at UHart, and ultimately came to realize that I would benefit more from an executive ed program where I had a built-in network and could stay in touch with these people.
Comes back to it's not what you know, who you know type
right.
of deal. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So but yet they drilled cases into us 3 weeks a year for 3 years. And I got my crash course in business, right? I understood how to value a business. I understood how to do debits and credits. I understood how marketing, organizational behavior, IT, you name it, everything you would get in an MBA curriculum, but with the peer network to go with it. That led to YPO. And it's a little bit more self-serve now because I'm not required to be at classes a certain time. But, my team knows that I'm constantly sharing ideas. It's almost too much.
Yeah. I'm so passionate about the idea that to be a great business leader, it can't just be all the time thinking about debits and credits and kind of managing the business to like the utmost profitability or efficiency. There's got to be the why, the BHAG that you kind of referenced before. And I also think it extends to your personal health and your family health. And I think focusing on like just the business would be like an athlete. We talked about baseball earlier. It'd be like a pitcher only focusing on throwing the pitch and not ever hitting the weight room, not worrying about nutrition, not worrying about kind of like mental health and being mentally in the game. I think it's so important from that peer networks. And for me, from EO and you from YPO, it's just been so powerful, I think, to kind of get that support and that whole well-rounded approach.
When you think back to, or when I think back to when I worked with those consultants, it was in the 1999-2000 timeframe, really working hard to transition the business from G2 to G3. I learned from them this concept that is depicted in a Venn diagram. And you think about 3 different circles: personal, family, and business, right? And how do you balance all 3, right? You want to be in the middle, so to speak, that where they overlap, right? The sweet spot. And we did a little poll, who in the family put personal first, who put business first, who put family first. And we all agreed that my grandfather went business, family, personal. He put himself last.
Sure. Pretty typical for that generation.
It
I would
is.
say.
Second generation was, family, business, personal, right? And I was personal, family, business,
Okay.
right?
There you go.
And that happens in multi-generation businesses where the perspective shifts.
Mm-hmm.
For me, if you take care of yourself first, then you can take care of your family. You got a great family, then you can really make the business work for you and
So
work
how
for
do
your
you
family.
take care of yourself? What are your interests? What do you do besides make Horst go?
I'm an endurance athlete, so I watch a lot of sports, love sports, but I rather
Do you have a TV now?
no TV in my house.
okay.
We have screens in our house, but no, there's no TV.
Okay.
I think I mentioned that to you before.
You did. That's why you
I
said
haven't had a
watch
TV.
sports. So
Yeah, YouTube,
okay.
right?
All right.
Instagram.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Watch being a figurative term.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
listen to a lot of radio.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know if they can see it, but the Red Sox memorabilia on the wall here.
Yeah.
I listen to baseball.
Right.
It's kind of the old way.
Yeah.
But I do sports, primarily cycling related sports, triathlon, trail running, swimming, adventure racing, you name it. So I physically and mentally invest in myself, right, to kind of be the best I can be, from almost an athletic perspective. So you think about the CEO as an athlete, right? Any athlete is putting in not just the training hours, but the rest,
Yep.
right? The nutrition, the mental side, right? It's trendy, but to talk about meditation or just that kind of self-care. I do all of that, right? I think I was talking to someone here in the cafeteria earlier, and they were surprised at how much I sleep.
How
Right?
much do you sleep?
I try to get 8 hours,
Okay.
right? And I'm usually between 8 and 9, and I'm often in bed before my 10-year-old. I mean, that's partially her problem. We can't get her to stop singing and playing with her toothbrush or whatever. But I put a huge priority on that.
Yeah.
And that allows me to go hard, the rest of the day.
I think people would be amazed if they read your CV. I'm tempted to post it linked up with this podcast.
That's proprietary.
Because you're a beast from an activity standpoint. And I think, listen, one thing we didn't talk about from a constituency standpoint, which I'll touch on a little bit now. You talked about personal, you talked about family, you talked about business. You didn't talk about community. And one thing that we've talked about in this podcast before that we've seen over and over again is the successful people in business are also super involved in the community, and you are absolutely no exception. We talked about your role with the Vermont Adaptive Ski and Sport Association, which I had some interaction with after my skiing accident left me paralyzed, and I learned how to ski with those guys, or relearned how to ski at a Scutney. You're an avid cyclist, and you kind of get involved with that. You're a preservationist. You're involved with preservation in Connecticut. Anyway, I don't even name all the different things.
Yeah.
Nonprofit boards, bank boards. I mean, you're just all over the place, Scott. How do you do it, man?
I am fortunate that I have great energy and that I constantly keep that energy level high by doing all those things that we were just talking
Motion
about.
creates more motion.
It does. I mean, when you're looking at the nonprofit world or philanthropy, volunteerism, you don't call on the person that never volunteers, right? You go back to the person that keeps putting their hand up, and it's almost like an addiction. I'm always trying to make an impact. I love that word, impact, and I want it to be beyond our business. That's why our business supports so many different nonprofits. My personal passions, are in this outdoor recreation, outdoor education space, and coupled with that is conservation and the environment. So I feel like they absolutely can fit together with a business mindset. So my personal contributions in those areas are to serve on different boards like the Appalachian Mountain Club, like the Connecticut Forest and Park Association. We've got our own cycling team, which includes a junior team for children. We've got 10 kids in between ages 9 and 18 that race bicycles and trail run. And so sharing those healthy passions with the next gen is a big part of what I do. My wife is very involved in
Also
nonprofit
a major
work.
endurance athlete, as we talked about earlier.
She is. Yeah, she's really the fit
I was
person in
going
our
to say,
family.
based on our earlier conversations,
Yeah, when she's made a career of it. She's a yoga instructor, yoga teacher, and not yoga as it is in 2019. She's been doing it for more than 20 years. She went to Springfield College, which is also where the YMCA was founded. So that whole idea of spirit, mind, body is in the YMCA logo. It's actually in the logo for Springfield College, that inverted triangle. So she's brought that to our household, and I think that's bled into the business as well. So when you think about caring for employees, building a culture that can compete, it's doing all those things. One of the things we talked about earlier in terms of employees and how are you shaping the culture, we have an F3 team.
Okay.
So F3 stands for Fit, Form, Function. I think it's a cool name.
It's a very cool name.
The team came up with this name. Someone on the team did. It used to be called the Health and Wellness Committee. And
F3 is so much better.
And the nickname was Hawk, but spelled HAWC, which was kind of cool too.
That is kind of cool,
all right?
Actually. Sure,
but
sure.
they needed to transition and rebrand, so Hawk became F3.
Okay.
And we just had a meeting earlier this week, and I'm the leadership team champion for that team. So we've probably got half a dozen employee-driven teams throughout the company, and then there's a leadership team champion for each one, but they have a chair that comes from elsewhere within the business, someone who's got that personal passion.
And how do you find those people and engage with them to get involved in those groups?
It happens as soon as we recruit them.
Yeah.
So I do a new hire tour with everybody, and we've had to hire people through this growth and through different turnover. So every time I get a chance to tell people that one way to learn the business is to get involved in something outside your area. Right. So join the ISO audit team, join the Epicor core team. That's our ERP system, right? Sure. So do something outside of your area and get involved.
It's almost like university, right? Get involved in a club, join something. Doesn't matter what it is.
If we were large enough, or maybe I don't want to make an excuse. I want to say if. Many businesses rotate people through different functions, right? And that's how they learn. It's how I learned, right? And this is one way to sort of do that.
And give them the ability to sort of self-select their rotation to some degree?
To some degree. And they can be on multiple teams. We let people do different things.
That's exciting. I don't want to I am going to backtrack, because one thing you said I'm interested to ask this question, which is, I know you've got a passion. We talked about it kind of a couple different times. You brought up on the podcast your passion for the environment, for conservation. Yeah. I mean, we talked about you being an avid cyclist. You bike to work very often in all kinds of weather.
Yeah.
How does that sort of green mentality, if you don't mind me using kind of maybe an overused current colloquial term, how does that influence the decisions you guys make at Horst to greenify or whatever what you guys are doing there?
Green is a great quick way to refer to how you live. All right. So whether it's, my plant-based diet, or it's my commuting to work on a bike, or it's the trail maintenance that the organizations I'm involved with does, or it's the waste elimination that we have at work, all of it can kind of fit in that category. From a business perspective, I would describe it as responsible business. I recently spoke at the CBIA Sustainability Conference, and they've known of our business practices for years. Adam Ney, he has been involved in green business activities for many, many years that predate the kind of craze which followed the oil crisis, right? So, everybody was thinking green when oil was $100 a barrel. Sure. But it's been my life. I came into the outdoors through Scouts.
Yes, you're an Eagle Scout.
Yes, and that's what got me involved in the outdoors, and really that's where my passion for the outdoors and for conservation and the environment developed. In business, we tried to not use the term sustainable. I've been influenced by the company Patagonia. Their founder, Yvon Chouinard, wrote a book called Let My People Go Surfing. And then he wrote another book called The Responsible Company. And I like that, think about it in those terms, the responsible company, because business is inherently wasteful. It consumes, it uses resources. All you can do is work to minimize that. So we do that in our business. We talk about it. We're going to do it even better when we have the new location. We got everybody under one roof, and we can really drive for some of those improvements.
Do you think that that approach is compatible with an effective and profitable growing business?
Yes. I being a family business, and again, that long-term mindset and my own personal approach of constantly reinvesting, yes, we can do the good, right? How does that saying go? I'm going to forget it now. Doing good is good business or something like that. There's very different little sayings. But I absolutely believe that you can contribute to the community, contribute to the environment, and still be a successful business.
Listen, I'm going to leave it right there because I think your life proves that exact thing, that you can be good, you can do good, and have a successful business. You guys are doing it all the time, and you're living that life. So I really like that. I'm going to move on to a rapid fire round of questions with your permission. Ready to rock?
Ready to rock.
Here we go. Red Sox or Yankees?
Red Sox.
Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts?
Tea. I don't drink any. No caffeine.
Coffee. Oh, that's right. When you take time off, Scott, you more of a staycation or exotic destination guy?
We travel for adventure.
Adventure travel. iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Sports car or SUV?
Bicycle.
If you could do anything in this world other than being the CEO of Horst Engineering, what would you do?
There's a few, but I'd be a National Geographic photographer.
Ooh.
Or a journalist.
Or a journalist.
For National Geographic.
What's your favorite business book?
Favorite business book? I don't have a favorite business book. I've got a book I'm reading right now that you can apply to business, life, sport, and it's called Peak Performance. It's really resonating with me right now.
That's a great book. What's one thing you learned early in your career or early in your life that's helped propel you to the success you are today?
Total cliche, but it's hard work. I mean, growing up in a family business, seeing my grandfather struggle, my parents struggle, that's just embedded in me.
What's one thing you learned later in your career or later in your life that you'd go back and tell young Scott that you think would be really valuable?
Lighten up.
That's awesome. That's really, really fantastic, Scott. I so much appreciate the time we spent together. If people want to reach out to you or follow up with you, someone's interested in doing business with Horst or getting a job at Horst or just kind of engaging more, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, I mean, website's horstengineering.com.
HORST engineering.com, yeah.
Correct. I've got a blog, scottlivingston.com. scottlivingston.net.
Yeah.
All right. We'll have to edit that one.
That's right.
And, we do a little bit of social media. So you can find us on Instagram at HORSTENG and at HORST Cycling.
There you go. That's awesome. We're going to put as much as that as we can fit into the podcast notes. So anybody that wants to connect on any of that stuff, whether it's the cycling, the green stuff, or the business stuff, that'll be in there for you to look at. So last question to wrap up here is, we've been through a lot. We've talked about a lot of stuff. And I'd like you to think about what we talked about and maybe pick out the one thing that you think if someone listened to this whole podcast and just walked away with one piece that they could actually execute on, what do you think that kind of big takeaway that drove value would be that we talked about today?
We didn't have a chance to go too deep on it, but I would say that the personal health piece, right? Being the best that you can be, balancing that with exercise, nutrition, rest, mindfulness, that would be the ticket, right? Yes, I was born with, good energy, but I've really maintained it. And I think if people want to be better business leaders, better parents, just better selves, there's a lot there for you to explore.
I 100% agree with that. On my end, I sometimes I take the liberty of doing two. I actually think I could have done four based on our conversation today. But I think the two that I think really stuck with me, the first one, which is a little bit of actually dovetailing on what you said, which is I think it's so important that business people realize to be successful, they have to look at that 3-part Venn diagram: the business, personal, and family. And I think when those three things are in alignment, man, things are just rocking and rolling. And it's not just that you that I've seen success in business, but it's just success and happiness in life, and things are going super well. That sweet spot is where everything's firing, and I think too many people miss that and sort of local optimize on one and neglect the other two at different times. So I think that's super important. And the other thing you said that was a great takeaway is constant investment. Constant investment in your business, constant investment in yourself is what drives long-term success. I think if people could take that away from here, it'd make our community a much better place to be and drive a lot of value. So
yeah, both of those things make total sense to me.
That was awesome, Scott. This was super fantastic. We could have gone for like another hour. I'll have to have you on again. Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Yeah, have me back. I do have to credit you for doing this and for bringing more awareness to manufacturing and to the Connecticut economy.
Thank you so much, Scott.
Thanks.
Made in America with Ari Santiago is brought to you by IT Direct.
As always, thanks so much for tuning in. I definitely want your feedback and hope you subscribe. But what I want the most is to build a community where we learn and grow with each other. I hope you're getting a lot of value out of the time we're spending together. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you next time.